Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
I'm waiting for the shit to hit the fan.
Well, on that note, hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part 2, joining me today is Steve Baxey, aka Steve Baxey, and Mr. Cool 210, aka Ben Thompson. Hello, gentlemen.
Hey, everyone.
And I keep forgetting to make this announcement at the beginning of new episodes, but, ladies and gentlemen, you can now download full episodes of Geeky Gentlemen, the audio for Geeky Gentlemen, and listen on the go. Put it on your phone, whatever. There's a link in the description where you can download this episode, and you can look through the thing and download newer other episodes. And you can even download episodes that at times will not be up on YouTube yet, just because I'm too lazy to upload those in the same sequence. New episodes will be uploaded with the episodes as they're posted on YouTube, though. If you really, really want an old episode to be uploaded, leave a comment on that episode's YouTube video, and I will upload it to archive.org. But it's all in the description there for you to enjoy, and I'm going to be trying to remind myself to make that announcement over and over and over again. Steve, I'm giving you the responsibility to remind me, since I have a shit memory.
Well,
anyway.
Every single
we should get
200
like everyone.
reminding them.
We should get everyone that's been on the show before to come up with like their favorite episodes and start uploading like once a day, like the top 50 Geeky Gentleman track.
Oh, that'd be cool. We could do that. Anyway, Steve, what are we talking about this week, though?
Okay, so today we are talking about, because we've done a couple of reviews so far, so today's discussion is going to be about essentially superheroes, the public domain, and the whole copyright problem. Essentially, the notion of, because this has come into under scrutiny very much lately because of some of the copyright stuff that had to do with Superman a couple years ago. This idea that characters like Batman, Superman, Spider-Man should be allowed to be used by anyone completely in the public domain. What does that mean for the industry? Is it a good thing, bad thing? All of that.
Indeed, and it's a really just interesting issue of copyright, the public domain characters and stuff like that at this point, because, I mean, you know, there's just... there's a whole bag of worms here. But I think the best place to start on this would be to talk about something that I don't get to talk about nearly enough. Zorro. So Zorro is almost 100 years old. Zorro will be 100 years old in 3 years. His first story was published in 1919. And the original story, The Curse of Capistrano, is in the public domain technically, but they're still trying their best to just keep the rights to that. There's all kinds of just mess with Zorro and copyright, and just these characters keep the whole rules around how long you can have a character or a story copyrighted for keep getting extended because no one expected the popularity and the merchandising for these things to be able to last.
If I remember correctly, one of the big people one of the big companies anyway, that kind of started the whole extending the copyright thing was Disney.
Yep.
Because Mickey Mouse was about to expire and go into the public domain, and they're like, nope, we need to make money. We need to keep making money. And so they like begged them to extend it, and then they did, and now it's something like how many years does it have to be before it goes in public domain? Like 78 years minimum, I think.
It's like originally it was till the creator died, and then they extended it for like I think an additional 20 to take care of the creator's kids, but then it got extended like an additional 50, and then I think right now the hard limit is 100 years. But even then, it's only certain things, because like Dracula's over 100 years old, but the character isn't in the public domain, just the original story.
Yeah,
I
it's
thought
a
Dracula
little bit
was in the public
sticky
domain.
because it's a little bit sticky because there are certain versions and there are certain uses of the characters that can't be taken away from the company. Like, for example, Bugs Bunny was created in 1938, so you'd think in 2038 he'd be in the public domain, but the big problem that legal's facing with him right now is he's part of the WB logo. So you can't, it's a very hard to negotiate between the copyright of that character and the trademarks of Warner Brothers as a company.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like,
And even then, like Bugs Bunny, would it be the Bugs Bunny we know now, or would it be the original short Bugs Bunny?
Yeah, the original
Right?
one, the kind of almost Daffy style crazy one, the Tex Avery style.
wouldn't really
Yeah.
technically every version of it's not like they have a different copyright for every iteration of Bugs that comes out, so you would still have you should still have access to the more modern interpretations of that character. I mean, like, you should, but I'm not sure if they would.
It's confusing stuff because, I mean, Warner Brothers as an institution has gone through several different animating branches and creators and such, so it might be to the point where, like, certain episodes created under certain department heads count for them and certain ones don't, because Warner Brothers very famously early on shifted different production companies really, really often. They used to have like at least 10 to 20 different animation studios on hand at any given moment, and that created a lot of problems later, which is partly why you don't see like the earlier versions of Bugs Bunny even make like cameos and other things.
It's all just a big ass can of worms, and we're gonna try to get into it. So like normally I'd like to go round robin and just see what everyone thinks, but I'm pretty sure I can just call. So everyone's cool with really popular characters just being thrown in the public domain so that anyone could do whatever they want with them, right?
Yep.
We're all cool with that, right?
To a point, because I've heard arguments on both sides with it, like people defending companies keeping it and people defending, like, you know, going to the public domain. I do more so stand that it should go to the public domain because I think that there's potentials for good stories there. But the one negative about it is that if it does go into the public domain, there might, you know, sure, if one company is like, let's use like Superman for like an example, since like, you know, he would have gone into the public domain if the rules didn't change. Sure, we may have still gotten like Man of Steel, and we may have gotten a really great movie if it was in the public domain, but we also could have gotten a bunch of other movies that are complete and utter garbage because it's made by people who don't know how to make movies.
Well,
I don't know if that's really
I'll wait, hold on, Steve. Let me go for the easy joke.
Sure.
Well, you already have the Superman movie made by people who don't know how to make movies. It's called Batman vs Superman. There you go.
I thought
Just
for sure you were going to say Superman Returns.
no. Superman Returns. It's weird how many of the Superman movies have like amazing trailers and then are just kind of bad.
I saw that joke coming, and I'm not saying that's a reason why it should be, but I'm just saying that's a reason I've seen people defending the.
No, I get what you're saying. Like,
it's
it's weird because this coincides with kind of like a similar argument that's out there now about fan films. And one of the arguments I've heard about why studios should be able to limit super high quality, you know, professional level fan films is because they don't want the products getting out there and quote unquote tainting the brand of the franchise so that people think that all Star Trek is bad because all they see is fan-made Star Trek that's bad. And there are certainly just a number of assumptions that are complete horseshit in that. But I think the biggest one to point out, and then the one that is most relevant to this conversation, is just because there's a lot of shit put out that says, you know, Star Trek or Superman in front of it, doesn't mean that everyone's going to watch it just because it says Star Trek or Superman. There are plenty of like shitty things that come out that are clear ripoffs of these characters that are under copyright, and people don't go watch it. And it's not just because it doesn't have the word, you know, like, what is it? It's no one watches Alien vs. Hunter, and it's not just because it's not called Alien vs. Predator. We know it's bad, and it's not just the name that gives us the tip off, right?
And I'll make a capitalist argument here, even though I am not one. But like, part of the thing with this argument is just because everyone can make something, that doesn't mean they can get the word out or they can make it well enough to entice other people. Like, for example, if you had a bunch of people sitting down to make Superman movies, how many of them are going to be brave or monetarily or stable enough to go head-to-heads against Warner Brothers marketing?
Yeah.
Like it's not realistic to assume that just because you get a character in the public domain, you're automatically going to get a rush of all of this character overpopulating media. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and like, how many of the big studios are going to try to do something with the character at the same time?
Exactly. Like, there's no
the other
way
question.
Disney's going to go out of their way to make a Superman movie just because he's in the public domain.
Yeah, it's a really risky move.
Well, I mean,
because
maybe not
if it's-
now, but if you're talking like 1940s, 50s Disney, probably, yeah, they would.
In 1940s, 50s, sure, but I mean, like with the way superhero movies, particularly right now, are being handled, Disney would be more okay with just keep maintaining their Marvel brand as opposed to sitting there trying to capture Superman, especially when even if you went into the public domain, you'd still have a copyrighted version of Superman under what's under the DC Expanded Universe. So why would they risk confusion with Superman and cross-promoting movies like that when they can just leave Superman alone and let DC break themselves by constantly making movies that are poorly reviewed?
Yeah, pretty much. Like, why would anyone take that risk of, like, why would a big studio take the risk of making a bad Superman? Like, this is really weird. Why would any studio take the risk of trying to make a movie that could at least publicly be perceived as worse than Batman vs Superman?
Yeah.
Like, why would you do that with that character at that point? It's just, that's such a gamble for a big studio to take, because then it would just send people to Warner Brothers. I mean, it might have some payoff, and you'll get people going, oh, well, I'm only going to see the Fox brand Superman movies now as opposed to the Disney or Warner Brothers, but that's such a big risk for absolutely the dumbest reasons. It's a risk purely out of spite at that point.
And Sherlock Holmes has got the same thing, right? Like, no one's going out of the way to compete with Robert Downey Jr. movies and BBC's Sherlock, at least not until they're both over.
Yeah, I mean, you could maybe make the argument Elementary, but still.
Yeah, and I mean, Elementary is able to survive because they pitch themselves as, what if we just made Sherlock but American, in the same way we do that with a lot of BBC shows?
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, well, then again, that Broadchurch spin-off sort of thing didn't really last very long after.
It didn't, did it? It only got like 2 seasons, didn't it?
It only got 1 season.
Did it only get 1? Oh, I thought it got at least 2.
Broadchurch, the main show, got 2 seasons, and now they're working on the 3rd right now. But
right.
I guess it is more so just a thing of, sure, like, it would be a kind of a dumb risk in order for them to make movies like that. And I'm not more so talking about, like, film studios in particular. I more so mean, like, I don't know, maybe there's some. It's hard to describe.
You're talking about like lower studios, like smaller studios putting out something with the Superman title on it.
Because even if they're a small studio and they can't really compete with Warner Brothers or whatever, if they put out a Superman movie, unless it's like the absolute most dog shit Superman movie you could possibly make, and it gets like positive attention for them, then it would make them a lot of good business because Superman's such a popular character.
Well, the other thing that we're not looking at here is, just because the main characters are in the public domain doesn't mean everything in that universe is in the public domain.
Yeah, good point.
It would be 1930s Superman who could jump really far and
yeah, like there are certain elements that just legally speaking wouldn't be able to be in the public domain. Like, I'm pretty sure Lex Luthor wouldn't be able to be in public use for like at least another 10 to 20 years.
And then at
right?
that point, it would still be like mad scientist Lex Luthor, not like slimy businessman 70s Lex Luthor.
Yeah. So there's so many things. You'd have to be doing some really particular stuff. And I just don't think there's that much profit in it. So it's just, just let it happen. Just let the character go in the public domain already, so that we can get people with passion behind it. Then when they go out and make their passion project Superman movie, WB can be all like, okay, this is what people are responding to, so let's get this person on board our Superman official, studio property.
And part of the thing with this is that, particularly with characters like Superman and Batman, they're already so much part of the culture that it seems ludicrous to hang on to them as much as you do, because you could get free marketing out of other more common uses. Like, for example, Seinfeld had a big deal with Warner Brothers with using Superman all over the place. But even more than that, Superman is a thing everybody knows. People make Superman jokes and references in everything. If he was in the public domain, it would take a long time before people stop associating Superman with Warner Brothers and DC specifically. So for at least a good chunk of time, it would just be free marketing for their version.
Pretty much. Like you'd be talking at least another 50 to 70 years before he would fade away. Like that association with DC and Warner Brother films would fade away.
And then at that point, Warner Brothers and DC would do so much to keep Superman in the forefront of their company and their image that it might almost strengthen the character at that point. Maybe he'd become the new Warner Brothers logo instead of Bugs Bunny.
Yeah. It's weird because it's this like legal attempt to, claw and bite and keep every little thing, every little intellectual property. And I mean, to be fair to the studios or the corporations, because it's not just the film studios, it's old DC mob boss comics.
Yeah.
Fun fact, just fun fact, DC Comics was originally set up as a money laundering scheme for the mob.
Comics were delivered to your door by mob bosses. This is true.
Yeah. So anyway, so Superman was created as a front for the mob. Just love that little factoid right there. But anyway, the original rights to Superman, if I remember correctly, were sold outright, full rights for $100 to each of the creators. Joel Simon and Jerry Schuster. Did I get that right?
Joel Schuster and Jerry Simon.
Oh, okay. So close.
Or yeah, I think no. Siegel and Schuster, right?
Isn't it? It's
Siegel
and
right.
Schuster. Yeah, Simon's the other guy, Captain America guy.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So like you had the thing sold from the very beginning, and these were like fuck it, they're poor kids who grew up. $100 was more than either of their families had ever made in a single day. So that was like a big deal to them. And of course, it was an undervalued sale, and there's all this other stuff. But the corporations, to their credit, they paid them. The people got their money. They didn't get nearly what they deserved. They didn't realize what they were selling. We can make all kinds of arguments about that. But they did get paid for it, so I have no problem with the fact that the corporations want to hold on to something that they legally bought. But at the same time, it's just no one that did anything in the creation of these characters is alive to benefit from it anymore. Everyone's gone. And that's why extending the copyright to the heirs and the studios and all this crap is just so stupid to me, because I'm like, okay, if you managed your stuff correctly, if you got the rights to the characters, if you were making money off the character when you were alive, you should have been able to put stuff away and keep and manage your resources enough, if it was this big a deal of a character, to take care of your to take care for your family for at least a couple generations.
Wasn't that like the original thing with it? Like they allowed the copyright in order to go through the creator's whole life cycle so they can get everything in order for their family. Like I think that's that's why
that was the original idea, and then they extended it so that the direct descendants could live off of it. And then it got extended again and again and again, and now it's solely for the companies at this point.
The only thing I don't really understand. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
With Superman in particular, back when the Christopher Reeve film was coming out, one of the film producers convinced the studio that it was a good PR move to give more rights to the original creators since they were still alive at the time, and then that they signed the rights over to their families before their death, or on the occasion of their death or something. It's been a long time since I looked into this. I could have done research for this episode, but
why
that'd be too
fuck that.
No, but like a question I did have though, it's a bit weird. Like with you talking about Schuster and Siegel, yeah, like, and even to a lesser extent Bob Kane and Bill Finger. With them, DC just flat out bought the copyright from them. what I find a bit strange then is I've never heard any stories about that sort of thing happening with Marvel. It seems that like Marvel kind of always owned the copyright for like Spider-Man and Fantastic
Mm,
Four and Hulk
yeah,
and them.
Stanley was pretty much the face of Marvel. He ended up copyrighting a lot of things, and there's a lot of bad blood between like it's weird. It's a really complicated relationship.
Well,
The
I've heard
I
mixed
think the
things on that.
best
Like
thing you
I've
can
always
say
I've heard
for
he was good with like that he's I've heard like, some of the families being like, "Oh, we treated him like shit," but then I'm hearing from like everyone else who's always like, "Oh, he was treated like Jack Kirby and it's like Steve Ditko like perfectly good people." Like cuz I think Steve Ditko and Stan Lee are still on good terms at this point.
it's a really complicated relationship where like I don't think Stanley was ever like a Bob Kane dick where he just ran out and copyrighted it and then made sure he got to hold on to all the rights. But Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, all those guys didn't get nearly the credit for the works as Stan Lee did, and not nearly enough as they
Is
deserve.
that
Yeah,
really
because I mean,
his
Marvel was
fault
more
though?
about the Marvel brand as opposed to DC being about the DC brand. So even when Stan Lee worked with some of the creators, everyone worked knowing full well this is for the company and the universe before it's for any of them. And most Marvel writers at the time used pseudonyms, and they didn't want to admit to writing comics in the first place, so they didn't care about the rights to them initially.
Yeah, but I mean, even Jack Kirby specifically, like Alan Moore always, being Alan Moore, tries to bring up this like dick move of like, oh well, if you look at the original Jack Kirby pencils, he would write in his own little dialogue balloons with like suggestions for dialogue. And you can say what you will about Jack Kirby's dialogue writing, he clearly wasn't the best at dialogue. So Stan Lee would slightly alter it to sound more human, and but by and large would just balloon by balloon copy all of Jack Kirby's
Well,
dialogue.
I find it weird that they're blaming Stan for that. I mean, is it really?
Stan was writing like 60 books at
Well, I
once.
mean, like the whole thing is like with the whole copyright thing. It's like Stan was the guy who's behind like the creative stuff with the stories. He wasn't behind legal anything, and like really every interview I've seen, he's always made it very clear that like when he's talking about Spider-Man, he's like, "Oh, Steve Ditko's the co-creator," and then like with Fantastic Four, Jack Kirby's the co-creator. Like he seems to be pretty much giving them as much credit as he can, with aside from going back in time and writing in the books, co-created by
And
Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. But and so
yeah,
yeah,
and
they're all angry.
he's been a little like on the fence on those. Like there have been times where he said it one way and times where he said it another way. I think that's just the inconsistency of a human being. But people like use it to cite, oh, see, he's an awful, greedy man. And I think really all it is just people don't want to like Stan Lee.
How can you not though? Like
Stanley's got issues though. Stanley's not responsible for Marvel as Marvel. Stanley's responsible for the names we recognize and associate with it. Like most of the great things that happened with all of his characters happened either after he left or against his wishes.
Mm-hmm.
So
Really?
I mean that's part of the issue is that Stanley's considered the face of Marvel and comics, but for most of the things that we recognize as great comic history, he wasn't a part of them, and we still give him credit.
what happened that he was against that was like considered one of the great things?
One of the things is that he didn't want to bring Captain America back.
Really?
There's quite a bit of that, but I mean that gets off topic, I guess.
Yeah.
I was just curious. I'd never heard stories like that before. So
Yeah, it's this weird, complicated thing, and it's just this, it's this idea of trying to own a character because it's so fucking new. So many of these things, like if we just go back, not even 200 years, which I know that sounds like a long time, but historically speaking, it's not. If we go back just like 200 years, the idea of like, oh, I wrote this character and I own all the rights to him and my family can sell the rights and this corporation can have the rights. It's just such a bizarre concept of trying to take something like, I can write a Superman story right now. There's nothing you can do to stop me. You can only prosecute me after I've done it. Like you can't stop me from doing it. You can't stop me from distributing it in some way, shape, or form. But it's just that you can only take action against me for doing it after the fact.
There is,
And that's just so ethereal and abstract that it's such a weird way to punish people.
It's funny though that you mention like with like certain versions of these characters being like in the public domain and certain ones wouldn't be. One question actually that did get me thinking. Another thing that would have been in the public domain soon if it worked if they didn't change it would be Doctor Who. And that got me thinking, if Doctor Who went into the public domain, like let's say if like tomorrow Doctor Who went into the public domain because it's like 68 years or whatever since the show came out, would only the first Doctor go into the public domain, or would all of them go into the public domain?
I think it would depend on how much was introduced in that initial episode. Because obviously the idea of regeneration wouldn't go to the public domain, because that wasn't introduced until the episode when Hartnell died. So, like, that part wouldn't go into the public domain. Probably the TARDIS. Like, the Doctor Who's weird example, because we have the Peter Cushing movies, right?
Yeah, but that was a weird thing where, like, that wasn't a public domain thing, though.
No, it's not a public domain thing, but it's a weird copyright issue because, like, the Daleks, that whole, like, that first Doctor Who movie with Peter Cushing is just the second episode of Doctor Who with the Daleks.
Well, I mean, that's the thing with the Daleks. Like, if you want to talk about fucking copyright, Doctor Who is one of the biggest kind of examples of that, where it's a rumor with the Cybermen, but it's pretty much been confirmed with the Daleks. At this point, the Daleks are with the estate. They're not, like, owned by the BBC. Like, they're with the estate of the guy who created the Daleks. And they have a deal with BBC now where they have to have a Dalek... they have to have a Dalek... I don't know if it's a Dalek-themed episode or just have a Dalek in it, but they have to have a Dalek in the show every season, or else they're not allowed to use it anymore.
Yeah, and that's just such a weird like thing because particularly the Peter Cushing movies I just find really strange because okay, the family owns the rights to Daleks. Cool, that makes sense. But somehow they're able to give BBC the middle finger and go make their Dalek spin-off movie, but they use a character named Doctor Who travels around in a machine called the TARDIS that is shaped like a blue police box. How are those things owned by the guy who made the Daleks and nothing else?
Well,
that
to be fair with that, I think what happened with that was Doctor Who was spelled differently than the copyright because it was just DR Who.
Okay, now explain TARDIS.
The TARDIS, no, I can't explain that, but with the phone box, that wasn't, no one owned the copyright for the phone box until BBC bought it after the Cushing movies. So
yeah, it's just like there's so many weird things like that where I'm like, what? How did that happen? And also, Ben, maybe you can explain this to me. Why the fuck do the Daleks have lava lamps in that first movie?
Budget. It was a budget thing.
Fear us and our lava lamp technology.
It was literally a studio wanted to make a Dalek movie because the episode with the Daleks was like so fucking popular that they're like, oh, we got to make it, but we got to make it on the cheap so it'll make money, and so they put lava lamps in with Daleks
because that's
given
so
how low budget Doctor Who typically is, I wouldn't be surprised if that went into the public domain. You might actually have the worry you were talking about earlier, Ben, of like more people putting their hands in the Doctor Who pie, because I'm sure someone like Universal or MGM would want to make a Doctor Who movie that's authentically British but is way higher of a budget than anything that show's ever done.
Well, they're working on one right now.
Are they?
BBC is talking with different studios, and I think they're talking with either... I don't remember if it was Universal or Warner Brothers they're talking with for Doctor Who movie, but they're talking about it. Although they're going to wait till Stephen Moffat leaves the show before they do anything with it.
Can we get a Warner Brothers DCEU Doctor Who movie and we'll have time travel fix the universe?
Oh my god, I want that so much. I want that right now.
Like, I really, this has nothing to do with anything, so I'll just mention it and we'll move on, but I bring this up every so often. I really want a 10th Doctor meets Superman story.
Isn't there one, though?
Like, there's like, some images of, like, the two meeting as, like, fan art comics, but...
There's a real comic where they meet. The 4th Doctor meets Superman.
I don't care about the 4th Doctor. I want specifically the 10th Doctor to meet Superman.
That would be so much fun, though. I would
Yeah,
love
I
to
mean,
see it
That's the
in
weird thing
live
with
action.
Doctor Who. He's like Doctor Who's kind of weird because like Marvel and DC have made comics about him.
Well, you could say the same thing for. Wait, no. I don't think DC's made Godzilla comics. I was going to say you'd say the same thing for Godzilla, but no, that's not true.
But like yeah, with that like I just the only reason I really kind of just brought up Doctor Who because it is just kind of an interesting idea with all these different like copyrighted things and yeah, Steve, that is the main reason because I've seen like some fan related Doctor Who things on the internet. Oh,
Hey, wait. Actually,
there's not
I'll
much
I'll
good
do
out
it.
there.
I'll do an advanced announcement. The next Geeky Gentleman fan film review is going to be on on a fan film called Alien Isolation. That'll be up this Thursday as you listen to this episode. I've got the days all worked out. But the one after that will be on a Doctor Who fan film called The Dalek That Time Forgot.
You better count me in on that one.
Yeah, you want to come? I actually do need a guest that is really familiar with current Doctor Who canon for that.
Oh, yeah, count me in.
Yeah, we're recording on Monday. We'll set it up after the fact, though. But yeah, it's that is a fantastic fan film, and it actually fixes this gigantic ass plot hole in the series. So I will always stick to, and it's an interesting
Well,
topic.
yeah,
Steve,
like you say,
blends into fan films with me. I will always stick to the point that the fans that technology is getting better and better and better, and the fans have the passion to the point where I think we're going to get stuff that looks as good as the studios, and so we're going to get to the point where we are more excited for what fans will be producing, what fans will have with upcoming projects with the property, than we will for the studio's quote-unquote official release.
And that's the crux of this whole topic for me, really, because you mentioned how weird it is for the last 200 years, the idea of owning characters, when historically art has always been a public thing. It's always been for the people. And if you start opening the floodgates of letting copyrights go, then art goes back to actually being art. You know, at this point, you stop making like a capitalist argument and you just start going into like the more moral territory of art. But art is best when it's not under. And I mean, there are exceptions, of course. We've made good movies and then whatever. But like the idea of a society that can just like make art whenever they feel like it, whenever they want to, how they want to, is much better for us in the long term than any sort of studio release system ever could be.
oh yeah, that's definitely true. And what you're saying, Ian, is right when it comes to like the way technology works. It does seem like fans with enthusiasm will make things that could be better. But there is still a big thing when it comes to a lot of movies of sometimes you need someone to kind of restrain you when you're having an idea because when it comes to creative control when it comes to a movie, I'm kind of the firm belief you need like a bit of a mixture of the two. And
yeah, I'd agree with that. Like, I think people do work well under some limits, but I think the limits of what you can do as a
more so my
studio.
argument is just more so that I just don't like. Yeah, there'll be some fans who will be there'll be some fans out there that they'll have great ideas. Doesn't mean they know how to write a story or make it or like film a shot or anything like that.
No, I agree, and I think that what you'll have is the best stuff will come through by trying to work around your limitations as opposed to having limitations put upon you by a studio.
That's what always happens with films in general is when working around limitations.
Yeah, and you'll get some truly great stuff because of it, and that's what a lot of the charm and some of the really great stuff of early Doctor Who, early Star Trek came from is they had like no budget. They had really strict limitations put on them by the studio, so they had to find creative ways to work around them. That's why the TARDIS is a fucking phone booth.
Yeah,
is because
it was gonna
he has
change
a time
every...
machine. Yeah, he has a time machine, and it was supposed to change for every episode, but they couldn't fucking afford it, so we'll just make it a TARDIS, or we'll just make it a fucking police box. So you'll have those limitations, but you'll eventually have a similar type of thing, but it won't be as restrictive as it would with a studio with fans. Like they'll have limitations of what they know, but they can always break those limitations when they really, really want to. And that's very important to me. Is you have those limitations, but they aren't hard, fast. The studio won't let you put this out if you don't like stop at this line. You can break past that line if you really want to. It could ruin your project to try, but you can.
I just can't wait. If any of these properties do go into the public domain, you just know that all of the cross fan fiction is going to become hugely popular with these movies.
Oh, wouldn't that be... That's all, folks. Wouldn't that be the best thing, though, right? We could finally get, like, really good-looking, fucking Batman meets Spider-Man movies or whatever.
Well, I was more so
Oh,
meaning
great.
I was meaning the really bad ones, like Frankenstein versus Superman, or like...
See, some of that shit that can be really interesting, though. I mean, because just the idea initially of like, oh, you're going to take a Norse character like Thor and just throw him in the middle of the Marvel universe. That sounds ridiculous. But I feel like if you did stuff like Batman, like we did Batman literally fights Dracula, or Superman literally comes face to face with Frankenstein, stuff like that could actually turn out really interesting. It's just a matter of making sure that people that want to write these stories are able to write these stories and their hands aren't tied behind their backs because of what people own and what people don't own.
And just generally, I mean, that's kind of what happens in comic books already to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Like, Milan has this great point that he always brings up. Nothing is gauche in comics. You can get away with anything to a ridiculous extent. You can make everything just completely over the top. You do not ever have to be subtle in comic books. It's one of the best things about Renato Jones, the 1%. There is no subtlety in that book. It is all just shove it in your face. But that's one of the beautiful things about comics, and it would be fantastic if we could extend at least some of that to film.
I think you guys think I was making a point, but I was more so just making a joke. And when I meant cross fan fiction,
I get that.
I meant like the Superman versus Frankenstein tagline, and then they had sex.
You know what this would really mean, though? It would mean a golden age in fan film porn parodies.
Oh yes, it
Oh
would.
my god. I don't know, because ever since that initial like superhero porn parody thing happened, they've gone nonstop, and they've had legal trouble in the past, but they keep like as long as they keep parody in the title, they're kind of safe. I don't know how well that business is going, or how much is thriving, or how much it would benefit from having laxed copyrights.
Well, like, the one that cracked me up was they made a Game of Thrones porn parody, and I'm like, at that point, why? It's almost already porn as is.
Yeah, like, would it just be collections of scenes? Like,
yeah. It's almost porn as is. You're just making it with bad actors now.
bad actors and a lower budget.
Yeah. No, that was really funny to me. The whole porn parody thing is such a bizarre idea. I think Manos probably summed up my thoughts on it the best. He's like, I don't get porn parodies. Now, don't get me wrong. I like jerking off, and I like laughing. I just don't like doing both at once. I guess different strokes for different folks.
Maybe that's why they made a Big Bang Theory porn parody, because that way no one would laugh while they're jerking off. Just like
oh, it's so true.
back on topic.
Okay, so the other thing with this is there are some things that people, and some of this just goes back to like whether or not you believe in death of the author or not, but like there are some things where creative intent is extremely respected, and just because you can do something doesn't mean you will or you should. There's that famous story of Grant Morrison being offered Miracle Man or Marvel Man or whatever he was originally called, but now he's Miracle Man. And Grant Morrison loved Alan Moore's run, so he wrote to Alan Moore and said, look, I don't want anyone else to do this, but if you don't want me to do this, I won't do it either, but I have this really good idea. Will you let me do it? And Alan Moore wrote him back a letter where it's almost like mafia-style intimidation of, if you do this, you will never work again. And then Morrison didn't do it until years later when Marvel got the rights again, and they published his original script from that era as an annual. And so when you open some of these lines, you have people that are fans of works that want to do something again. Like, I'm sure there will be someone that'll be like, now that The Crow's in public domain, let me make a Crow movie. Or now that Buffy and Angel and Firefly are in public domain, let me make a Buffy season 8 or a Angel season 6 or something. Or like a Firefly crossover, like a Firefly season 2 or something. And you can do that. But part of the reason we stopped trying is because Joss Whedon doesn't want to do that anymore. So, like, at what point... part of the thing with copyrights is that it allows you to definitively end things. You wouldn't want someone to go out of their way to make a fourth Dark Knight movie.
Yeah, you don't want Breaking Bad season 6.
Yeah, like, some things have endings for a reason.
You say that, but that's already been tried to be a thing. Someone went on Indiegogo and tried to make a season 6 Breaking Bad.
Yeah, but, like, that series just ends so badly anyway, so, like, why would you want to continue it? But just more so, like, they clearly, like, everyone is at an ending point. It is kind of just, you know, like, it'd be, if it were the studio doing it, you would just call it for what it is, which is just trying to milk it for all it's worth. But when it's fans doing it, it's just like, guys, just let it be. Just let it die.
Yeah,
come on,
like,
now.
I'm sure, like, with you, Ian, you wouldn't want the markets flooded with Morpheus was revived and a new Sandman ongoing.
Well, first of all, you don't need to revive Morpheus. But second of all, yes, exactly. You don't want a million bad Sandman things, because at that point it tarnishes the legacy. It tarnishes what made that thing beautiful. You don't want someone to redo every single story arc of Grant Morrison's Batman run.
That's exactly the argument I was making earlier. Like,
what?
That was exactly the argument I was making earlier with too many bad things of the same property just flooding.
Well, no, I think the difference
hold on.
between
I was making a
two...
Scott Snyder joke, and I want to finish my Scott Snyder joke.
Well, but before, I think the difference between these 2 points, though, is just that this is about things that have ended that will now continue and hurt a legacy, as opposed to one thing being oversaturated.
Yeah. You don't want someone to take Grant Morrison's Batman run arc by arc and redo it only shitty for 5 years. You don't want that, but it happened.
You know, All-Star Batman #1 was pretty good.
I don't give a fuck, dude. Who did he rip off this time?
Hopefully he didn't rip off Frank Miller's All-Star and Batman and Robin Batman, because...
I mean, it's a little bit Road Warrior right now, but I guess that was the initial premise anyway. So we'll see.
I don't want any more of pedophilic, maniacally laughing Batman that, like...
Now,
that forces Robin to eat rats.
Steve, if he keeps going and you keep, like, saying, oh, it's kind of like this thing, you realize that Scott Snyder is just a plagiarist, right? Like, we'll all just admit that at that point, right? Anyway, no, but, like, you do, like, at a certain point, you just do not want this to keep going. You want, like, it ended for a reason, let it end. But at the same time, that's not really how storytelling works. How many stories just end? Everything gets picked up somewhere. Like, everyone rags on Hollywood. Oh, all they make are sequels and remakes and adaptations now. Well, fucking sequels have existed forever, man. Sequels are just a part of things. Because, like, unless you kill literally every character that showed up in the book, it is almost impossible to find a story where there is no potential for a sequel, where there is absolutely no place you can go after this. The only example that I can readily think of where there's absolutely nowhere that it could possibly go that might be even the slightest bit interesting is Time Enough at Last. That's all I got. For those that don't know, that's the famous Twilight Zone episode where the guy is like wants to read all his books, and then there's the nuclear apocalypse, and he's the only one left alive, and so he was gonna read all the books in the library, and right before he was about to start, his glasses fall off his face and break, and he's like, "No, it's not fair. There was time now." That's like the only story I can readily think of where there's no potential for a sequel. And even then, I might
Well,
be
it is
wrong.
a nuclear apocalypse. The glasses could come to life and mutate.
Yeah, see, there we go.
There's always something.
Yeah, but really, in storytelling though, there is always something. Just because the original creator thinks it's done doesn't necessarily mean it is.
And I mean, to some extent, because you can't really make a concrete, like, statistical argument for this or anything, but fuck analytic philosophy, we'll go with regular, just, if you know people. And I mean, to your point, at the end of Shakespeare's plays, more often than not, everyone kind of dies. But at the same time, no one's ever going to go out of the way, and no one's ever going to let them get away with going out of their way to make a sequel to a Shakespeare play. People have tried numerous times to write, this is the definitive sequel to Bram Stoker's Dracula. No one knows about those books, and no one reads them because you don't want them. So, to an extent, I think there are certain things that would be saved. I don't think anyone would ever be okay with someone coming out and making Dark Knight 4. I really feel like that's one of those things where, like, other people would kill it before the person that wants to do it is ever able to do it.
Yeah, you could maybe...
I think you have more faith in humanity than I do, Steve.
You could... Like, there'd be spin-offs of certain things. There'd be spin-offs and, like, prequels. Like, using the Dark Knight example... The Joker blogs, I would call a spin-off Joker film from The Dark Knight.
Right.
And, you know, talk about the quality of that however you will, but it's not Dark Knight 4, even though Batman shows up in it at one point. Spoilers. It's not Dark Knight 4. It is a Joker movie in series form. Because it doesn't watch very well as a movie.
Well, it's like you say that, and like it is that way for other properties as well. I mean, Joker blogs is probably one of the best examples of that. But I do remember one fan film that came out a while ago called Horrible Turn. That was like a Dr. Horrible thing. That was like it was like a prequel, and it got a lot of attention. And like a lot of fans are all like, "Oh, I consider this is part of my head canon," but it's still a thing of it's not canon. There's still a lot of fans out there that don't consider it canon because it's not as well written as Dr. Horrible, and there's just a lot of like plot holes and like all these different.
And I mean, it's just not Joss Whedon. Like no one's going to consider a Dr. Horrible anything unless it's Joss Whedon or Joss Whedon authorized.
Right. Well, I mean, like the big thing they try to explain why everyone loves Captain Hammer in that prequel. And it's stupid because it doesn't make sense with like the Dr. Horrible movie. It was something like a fucking like a potion or something that gets poured onto Captain Hammer, makes everybody love him, and it's like okay, but then why does Penny not like always love him in Dr. Horrible the movie? Like that doesn't make
weird because there's a comic that explains a lot of this.
It's one of those things.
I think it was before the comic came out. Is that fan film came out?
Okay, that's interesting.
It's just one of those things where, like, yeah, there'll be people who just don't do it well, but that doesn't mean that it can't be done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are things that, like, yeah, I do kind of just want it to be left alone, but at the same time, I'm gonna be the first in line if it's good. Like, I would not have cared if someone just, blah, 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 blah. I would be perfectly comfortable with someone making a Dark Knight 4 if it was good. I don't think you can, but I'd love to be proven wrong.
And I guess that would ultimately be the challenge with this, right? Like, because it's like that thing where a professor tells you, okay, you can write about anything, and that's the worst possible thing someone can tell you because you don't know where to go at that point. You feel like you need some boundaries somewhere. So the idea of everything being public domain to an extent, it creates this thing of like clearly not everything is going to get some kind of adaptation immediately. But because we're used to certain things operating in our culture certain ways, well, we would have unspoken rules about what to touch and what not to touch. Like, no, again, um, no one's going. You can make a Dark Knight 4 if you want to, and if it's really good, that's fantastic. But you'd be aware of that legacy. You'd be pressured by just the notion of how well regarded that trilogy is, which would hinder anything you do about it in the first place.
Yeah. There'd be too much to live up to, so I just doubt many people would try.
And I mean, that's another thing with like Superman Returns. Like the biggest chip on the shoulder of that movie is that it wants to be Christopher Reeve, Richard Donner Superman.
And it's not.
It's not. And I mean, and again, that's just the thing of like, creators are always going to operate under the constraints of the culture when they're creating their stories before they start operating under the constraints of the studio. And if you destroy the constraints of the studio, the constraints of the culture are still ultimately the make or break process. There were lots of movies that are doomed because of what the public thought beforehand. And there were a lot of movies that are good because of what the public thought beforehand. Like, part of the reason Suicide Squad is such a jumbled mess is because of the reaction to Batman versus Superman. Part of the reason X-Men First Class is so good is because everyone hated X-Men 3.
And X-Men Origins
And
Wolverine.
X-Men Origins Wolverine. I keep forgetting that movie exists.
Yeah, most people do, and you can't be blamed for it because the studios seem to forget about it too.
Yeah, but then
you apologize for it, though, right?
Yeah, but to be fair, Fantastic Four or Fan4-Stick, I'm sorry, that sucked. Even though everyone hated every other Fantastic Four movie that came out, so there's acceptance.
But to be fair with that movie as well, that's another case of like every time an idea from that movie came out, fans revolted against it and it started to get slowly ruined and create pressure on the creators. And it created that whole jumbled environment where Josh Trank was kind of losing his mind on set.
Yeah, and apparently there's a beautiful cut of that movie that you'll never get to see. And I like it. At one point, I'm just wondering, is Josh Trank just trying to like tease us? Like he knows there's no good version of that movie, but even if there was, we wouldn't get to see it anyway. So he's just putting that out there to like save his image.
It's possible.
It's one of those things like studio involvement is so full of second guessing and stuff that it would be really interesting to see more things happen that were just pure creative vision without any limits. And I say that knowing that's exactly what happened with Phantom Menace and seeing how wrong that went.
Yeah.
And I mean, some of this is kind of idealist because not everything is going to be good. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And we would get lots of creators that do want to do whatever they want. They can do whatever they want, and they still suck. Like the Transformers movies, or the Phantom Menace, or just that whole prequel era to begin with.
Or most of Tim Burton's new movies.
All Tim Burton movies, except maybe one.
Ouch.
Oh, really? What's the one, Steve?
Ed Wood.
Oh, really?
I really like Ed Wood. We need to talk about that at some point.
Not even Big Fish makes it. Big Fish usually gets around for most people.
Big Fish doesn't do it for me. But sorry.
No, yeah. I mean, like, that's kind of what happened with Phantom Menace. Is like, I heard this guy explain it brilliantly once. He goes, "Okay, imagine that you go to school for lighting. You major in lighting. You know everything there is to know about how to light a set in a movie. And then you are a lifelong Star Wars fan as well. And you get a job working with the George Lucas on the first Star Wars prequel film. And you're on set. And George Lucas tells you, hey, put a light right over there. And he points at a spot where every fiber of your being tells you, never should there ever be a light there. You do it anyway because it's George fucking Lucas. And that is everything that went wrong with that movie. No one questioned him on anything.
What I find funny about that is everyone, like, no one questioned Lucas, and yet it was very, very clear that the reasons that the original movies were good was because of the studio coming in and being like, no, George, that idea is stupid. Let's do it this way instead.
Oh, not just the studio. Fucking, like, everybody. Like, there was a story about Harrison Ford, like, threw the script at Lucas and told him that he didn't know how to write dialogue at one point during the first Star Wars film.
To be fair, he's not wrong about the first Star Wars with the dialogue.
Yeah, there are times. Yeah, it's just one of those things. Like the idea of complete freedom. It's not going to be like once we get complete freedom, every film that comes out is not going to be perfect because it'll all be a passion project. No, there's going to be bad stuff, and it'll be bad for a number of different reasons. It'll be bad because people that have a lot of passion still don't know what the fuck they're doing. It'll be bad because people don't have anyone there to question them. It'll be bad because it's just a fucking shitty idea. It'll be bad for a number of reasons. There'll also be a lot of good things because we won't have to worry about the reasons that things are bad from a studio perspective now. And then there will be things in the middle that have some problems, but overall are still pretty fucking good.
There's so
Yeah.
much in this of like this idea where like you can extrapolate what would happen to the world itself if this happened. Like if everything just became free of copyright, we can start doing an entire separate video, which would just be where everything's copyright free. Go what happens to the world in the next 100 years. But I think part of what's interesting with this is that when we talked about this topic originally, it was under the notion of like superheroes or very specific characters getting that treatment, and all of them wouldn't. So, like for example, Dark Knight trilogy would always be protected under copyright, but anyone can make a Batman movie. But like the rules apply because Batman only had so many things when he first started. You get Batman, but you get like Hugo Strange and the Mad Monk, and you get New York City and the Batmobile, but you don't get like Alfred or Robin or Joker.
You would get Joker within what, 2 years?
Within a year, he came out in Batman #1.
Okay, so you would start to get some of those things, but you can only get very particular versions of those things. Like
Yeah.
just because you get Joker doesn't mean you get Heath Ledger.
Yeah.
Which is what I feel like most people would try to make now.
But wouldn't people who'd have the rights to the Joker, or be able to make something with the Joker character, a lot of these different movies now are all like, oh, we want to make our own the whole thing with Jared Leto as the Joker is like, oh, he wanted to make his own version of the character and make it.
And so he did Azzarello's.
But I mean, like, wouldn't fans kind of try to do that same? Like, so maybe some of the stupid fans will try to make it Heath Ledger, but I mean, like, there might be the fan out there that'd be like, oh, I want to make my own version of the Joker, and would that be going against like the public domain thing with the Joker, or would that be like perfectly fine because it's like a different version that hasn't existed yet?
I think there are certain elements that are universal regardless of what Joker you're doing. And it's even in like the first version, like there was very little things about Joker that weren't fully formed when he first showed up, except maybe like at that point he was more gangster than he is laughing megalomaniac, but like you can extrapolate that out of the characterization. I feel like there are a lot of things, particularly with the Joker, so much of his personality has always been up to the writer. Or like even if you get the basic concept of a guy that looks like him with the name attached, you could do anything and it wouldn't matter what gets released afterwards.
Yeah. There's just so many different little intricate details here and there, right? It's hard to imagine, okay, what if these specific characters were in the public domain, because there's so many specific details. I don't think anyone here is a copyright lawyer.
Nope.
Correct me if I'm wrong. There's so many specific details that I think it's just an easier thing to talk about. Okay, what if we just start removing copyrights from characters as a whole? What if we just start separating those out? Because I think that's just an inherently more interesting thing to talk about.
Well, I mean, like,
it's also related to this idea.
Well, I mean, I'm not for that idea fully. I think the original idea for the copyright system was perfectly fine. Have it run until the creator died, because you really wouldn't want it to be like, let's say if I came and I wrote like this really good story, and then it's like, oh, it's really well received, and then it's making good money, and then like it's all automatically in the public domain like right after it comes out, and then a million people are already coming out and like writing sequels and spin-offs and all this other kind of crap to it before I even get the chance to really do much with it, or like make any kind of my own sequels to it, or make a decent living off of it.
Yeah, it's. I do agree. I think there should be some copyright, but I think it should be much more limited, because I agree when it's just helping the creator themselves, the person that made it themselves, I'm more okay with it. I think the problem is that's not what we're really talking about anymore, though. Once again, none of the people involved with Superman or Batman are alive. No one, the only people making money off of it are corporations and family members who weren't even a twinkle in the creator's eyes, right? We're talking about the grandsons and granddaughters of these creators, maybe even great grandchildren at this point.
They weren't even the tiniest part of a sperm at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So just at that point, it's so far removed from the person that you're not protecting them. You're just feeding into like this hand me down.
And I mean, at this point, I think most people even acknowledge this because there was a thing published around the middle of the New 52 where a bunch of DC creators started talking about how they got paid for their creations and what rules applied to whatever they copyrighted. And so it became this thing where, like, you get the copyright to, like, say, Supergirl, and that means you get your name attached every time she shows up and says created by so-and-so. But because DC doesn't want to pay you for basically just making a derivative of Superman, you don't actually get money for it. And because Supergirl's, most of her rogues gallery started as derivatives of Superman, even if you have a character that's original to her, if she has a connection to, like, say, Lex Luthor, you also don't get money for it. So, like, it very quickly was acknowledged within the industry itself that copyright is just there to protect the company's interests and not the people. And even creators know this going in, which is part of the reason we don't see lots of new characters being created, is because they know the moment they create something within either of those two big companies, they're not going to get it. And some of that's even paid strategically with the companies where, like, Marvel is under strict orders not to create New Mutants because then Fox gets to use them.
Yeah, and like at the same time though, you get the people who play the long game. And you know what name I'm going to go to, Steve?
What's that?
Jeff Johns.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Jeff Johns played the long game, and it paid off really fucking well for him. We have a guy who, he started out just fucking writing this, I'm not going to get Jeff Johns' early career, but we'll just go to beginning of Green Lantern. Starts out writing this fucking DC C-list superhero that no one really cares about anymore, and just kind of had this rocky-ass continuity for years. And then he makes it almost to the point where he unseated Wonder Woman from the trinity of, like, most recognizable DC characters, and I love Wonder Woman. I'd make the argument that Green Lantern would have replaced Wonder Woman if people enjoyed the movie.
Agreed. I agree.
Yeah. So, at least temporarily, because then we might have gotten a Wonder Woman movie that people liked. But, and Johns put everything he could into his Green Lantern run. He created, not only did he create characters for his Green Lantern run, he created some damn good characters. Larfleeze is fucking awesome. Atrocitus is a fantastic character. Those are great ideas.
Jeff Johns essentially Jeff Johns has gotten to the same point as someone like Frank Miller did with Daredevil, where, like, the Green Lantern mythology's evolved so much under him that at this point you might as well attach his name as Green Lantern created by Jeff Johns under the two original guys, because there's no adaptation of Green Lantern you could ever make at this point that doesn't borrow from him.
Yeah, exactly. And so it paid off for him because, yes, he technically, he doesn't own the Atrocitus character. I doubt he gets, like, a cut from every Atrocitus action figure or whatever. But you know what?
Well, he does now, considering he's, like, the president of DC.
Yeah, well, now. But he doesn't get the creative cut. But now he's a major figure in the corporate culture, and it worked out for him playing the long game. Obviously, there aren't enough positions for everybody to do that, though. It's kind of like the Voyager, why no one got a promotion on Voyager. They couldn't promote everyone because then they'd have a ship full of captains.
That would be kind of interesting, though. No, you're right. I mean, and so much of this just goes back to, like, the whole idea of the starving artist. And if we did more to motivate creations in the first place, maybe some of these copyright issues and creative clashes wouldn't happen as much. Like, if it wasn't a matter of, like, out of a million possible writers, only one gets to have their day in the sun, maybe these things would not be as glaring, and maybe certain things wouldn't come off as stale because you'd constantly have rotating new blood.
Yeah, and just
Because there are so many great creators in indie comics right now that are never going to make the move to Marvel or DC because they know what that's like.
Mhm.
Well, that's the whole reason Image was created.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, Image didn't become Image for a few years because the original Image stuff is just fucking terrible.
Yeah.
No, Steve, you can't say that. How
Youngblood is
could
a
Steve Baxi
masterpiece.
hate something?
Young
How could Steve Baxi hate something? This is
Youngblood is
what
the
kind
Dark
world-
Knight of Image Comics, Steve. Come on.
It's arguable that Image didn't start living up to their original premise until just this past like 5 years.
Oh,
Like Image didn't become this hub of creators doing whatever they want to free themselves from the binds of the big two until like New 52 and Marvel Now happened and everyone got shut out.
Okay, one thing I want to make sure we talk about is I hate the idea that I hate the spin, the rhetoric that companies will use. And once again, this is so hard for me to remove from fan films, but when we talk about the Paramount fan film guidelines. Okay, Paramount, CBS, I'm talking to you right now. I understand.
None of you that are watching.
Yeah, I understand. I really do. That you just want to make money off of Star Trek. That's all you care about. I get it. And I'm not going to blame you for it. It's a very profitable franchise for you.
Everyone. You wouldn't you want to make money off Star Trek?
Yeah, exactly.
I do.
Like I completely understand why they want to make money off Star Trek. Do not fucking tell me that you're putting guidelines X, Y, and Z on fan films in order to protect fan films. You are doing it because you want to make money off of me and other people that consume Star Trek. Don't try to act like you're helping me. Don't act like you're doing me a favor by putting on these fucking guidelines. Those are for you. Just fucking own it, right? Like this idea that this goes well beyond Paramount and their bullshit guidelines. This goes just like everything. Oh, our copyrights are to protect our creators and make sure that they're profitable. No, they're protecting your ass. They're making you money.
What I find funny about that, what I don't really get, at least like with the whole copyright thing with fan films, I think I might have mentioned this before, but like Disney or not Disney, they hold a fucking like fan film thing for Star Wars every year, and I don't know what the prize of that is, but if they want to make money off of like Star Trek or like Star Wars or whatever, what I don't get is have a fan film come out. If the fan film's really well received, why not like just endorse it or something? Like endorse the fan film and like put it more out into circulation, and then the people who make the fan film would profit a bit off it, and then you'd profit a bit off it. It's like a win-win thing.
I truly do believe that, and I just want to make this point and then move on real quick because this is too tangential, but I truly do believe that no one should ever make money off of fan film, not the people making the fan film, and damn sure not the studio, because that is basically slavery if they start making money off of fan-produced work. But to that point, I would love Disney if they really embraced their fans and started having fan film contests for everything in the Disney wheelhouse. And the things that won, like say the top 10 things, got distributed on DVD at cost, and then any quote-unquote profit that was made went into some kind of scholarship program for film school students. That would be a brilliant use of it, and it would be purely a PR move, and would just like, if anyone from Disney is listening, do that shit and really fucking just burn the cigarette right into Paramount for just being shitty to their fans. But anyway,
Star Trek is one of those funny examples where like copyright becomes a bigger problem because Klingon as a language would not exist without fans contributing to it. And so like where do they draw the line of like what words are copywritten that the studio can use and can't use?
Yeah, it's all fucking
well it's like it's funny like with all of like this kind of copyright, like with studios being like stingy on the copyright. Paramount's being stingy on the copyright here. But then, like, even like I know you, like you said, like, you saw that Doctor Who fan film, the Dalek that Time Forgot. You might notice, Ian, there's not a lot of Doctor Who fan films out there.
Actually, there are.
There are. They're just not.
Yeah, there are a ton of Doctor Who fan films. Not very good quality ones though.
No, but it's more so a thing of a lot of the ones I've seen. BBC is very stingy with the copyright on that sort of thing. Like if you do anything, I mean, if I make a trailer for Doctor Who, they don't care, and people have even made, like, they're weird with it. Like, if you make a fan film of Doctor Who, then they get angry and they try to take the video down. But if you make a trailer for it out of footage from the show, they'll promote it on their Facebook page and comment on it and everything. It's like,
That's weird.
Yeah.
That's really weird. It's like Doctor Who in particular, and I'm sorry, I keep dragging this into fan films, guys. Doctor Who in particular, like, I don't understand why people make Doctor Who fan films and then use pre-existing doctors. It's like it's got a built-in gimme for why your actors don't have to look the same, people. Come on.
Well, yeah, I remember seeing a quote-unquote fan series where someone played the 10th Doctor, and it was like, okay, with the guy they got, if you just took a picture of this guy and, like, told me, like, okay, he's going to be playing the Doctor in this little fan film thing because David Tennant couldn't do it, I'd be like, yep, it looks exactly the part. But then he didn't even put on a fucking British accent when he played the part. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, it's so bizarre.
You fucking idiot. But yeah, I do agree with you. Yeah, with the whole fan film thing, it is still a thing of, like, studios should just sort of let the fans do what they want with these things and stop being like, we own the rights, we need to make money. Or no, to quote Tom and Jerry the movie, we got to have money.
Yeah, like, honestly, no, just if they're marketing it, if they're making money off of it, I agree. Like, don't shut it down. Don't be a dick. Just like, okay, you're making money off this. We can't have that happen. So you have a choice. You either have to quit profiting off of it, and you can keep the profits you made so far. We won't be dicks about it because it's fucking nothing to us anyway. You either have to quit profiting from it, or you have to stop making it. Those are your options. But to just, like, fucking cease and desist orders, it's so like, they're feeding into a narrative that they are the bad guys. It's just stupid. Okay, I want to get off this. Sorry, Steve, take us somewhere.
Okay, so we're going at this for like an hour or so. I want to just ask for each of you, like, what is definitively one copyrighted property that you would love to go into the public domain, and why do you think it would benefit from that, as opposed to the system it's been trapped in right now?
Well, I'm gonna.
My answer's obvious, so I'll do it after Ian.
Okay, I'm gonna go with the one that I started the show with, Zorro. Zorro is like that. He was created in 1919, but he's just such a, like, old character in everybody's mind at this point that he really does fit in with a lot of those old swashbuckling kind of, like that era, that 18th century hero kind of era of character. And we've done amazing things with characters like that, like Sherlock Holmes, like Dracula, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. We've done some great things with characters from that era, and he's one of the ones that just is that, like, perfectly set in that time. But I'd also like to see some legacy Zorro stuff, and I think you could do a lot of interesting stuff with that. So I would like Zorro to be in the public domain.
Cool. Ben?
With mine, like I said, it's obvious, at least just if you know me, it's more so obvious. With the potential, I know I keep talking about it throughout this episode, but I would say Doctor Who would be great for the public domain, just for the fact that, yeah, there haven't been great fan films at the moment, but it is still a thing of, that's a show that's literally designed that you could literally do anything you want, and, like, it would make sense as long as you give, a fucking, like, technobabble explanation. So the potential for stories and, like, locations and all these different things really could, like, expand if that went out into the public domain.
All you really need is a police box and a rock quarry. That's it.
Yeah, but it is sort of a thing of, like, you could do a thing of, like, but, like, oh, but what about the stuff with BBC? Like, yeah, there is that, but you could just say, like, oh, this is doctor number, like, 926 or something, who, like, that we would never see at any point in the near future, so it wouldn't, go against any kind of continuity. It is a sort of a thing of with a show that's designed for you to literally do anything you want. If it goes in the public domain, then the fans with really creative ideas would get the chance to make the stories they want to make.
Just as a Doctor Who fan idea, I would love to eventually get some kind of fan project that is definitively, this is the last regeneration. The Doctor's about to die. What are his last days like?
So you mean
I
like
love
they
Matt Smith's sign out so much. I think that's a fantastic way to like kill the Doctor if you wanted to.
Well, Steve, they've already done that. You see, he's going to die slowly over time due to radiation poisoning. He's going to go visit all of his friends. And he's not going to say anything to him. He's just going to stare and, like, nod his head all solemnly. And then go over to his next friend. And then maybe give him, like, a lottery ticket. And then he's going to go over to his next friend.
And then he's going to give one of them a boyfriend. And
Yep, exactly.
But yeah, I agree with you on that, Steve.
Real quick, Torchwood comic is brilliant.
I actually got to get into Torchwood. I have the whole season series. I got to watch it. I still haven't watched it yet.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, that is like that's my choice with your question, Steve.
Okay, I guess mine would be, because there's lots of good options. I would go with James Bond. I think James Bond is the 20th century equivalent to Sherlock Holmes, where the concept is extremely loose. It's got a few pieces of familiar location, and everything else you can just leave up to like fan and contextual interpretation. The way Eon's been operating with James Bond, it's given me the notion lately that they never actually understood what to do with him, because it always goes in cycles of like, let's introduce this concept, let's stumble around trying to figure out how far we can take this. Now we understand how far we can take this, so let's make something really good. Now let's try and do that all over again, and it sucks. So you get a pattern of like a first movie which is okay, a second movie which usually ranges from okay to bad, and then a third movie which is brilliant, and then a fourth movie that sucks. And then every Bond that has 4 movies has that pattern, even when you go to like Pierce Brosnan, who all of his movies suck, but they suck to very specific degrees within that ratio. So like it's come to this point where like Eon very clearly just wants to perpetuate the money they can make off of James Bond, and they don't actually care about that character or any direction they want to go with him. The idea of James Bond being used in any sort of interesting artistic way always comes second to what the current opportunity for them to profit off of is. Casino Royale exists not because they had an interesting story to tell with James Bond origin. It exists because, oh, finally we can make a Casino Royale movie. That's literally the only reason it exists, is because now they have the copyright to do it. So if James Bond went into the public domain, I think you can get a Sherlock Holmes situation of like, you would get a vacuum where there wouldn't be a lot, but there'd be sporadic enough installments that you'd get lots of different flavors of that type of character, and you might even get to this point where where like Sherlock Holmes, when it was created, was set in modern day, but for some reason we just kind of like stuck it as a period piece, and for some reason to put it in present day seems weird to people. I think James Bond might eventually have that, where like it just becomes definitively statement of Cold War fiction. We just keep making Cold War movies that are James Bond movies. I think that would be really interesting and would benefit that character way more than any of the Daniel Craig movies did, despite a couple of them being good.
You know, it's an interesting idea that might bear talking about sometime down the line.
And then they all go into the public domain and all get in a movie together. Zorro, Doctor Who, and James Bond all in one movie.
I would love a Doctor Who Zorro crossover. Yes, please. Please make that happen. That would be fantastic. See what I did there? Because...
Yes, I see what you did there. Zorro cuts a Z into the TARDIS.
Yes! I still want my Green Lantern Doctor Who Green Lantern Zorro crossover. God, I can't talk tonight. Which is great when you're hosting a podcast.
Oh yes.
No, I still want my Green Lantern Zorro crossover. I know it sounds stupid, but I promise it makes sense. But yeah, just fucking. It would be interesting sometime to talk about characters that get stuck in an era and for some reason never come out of it. Like that's weird that it happened, because when Sherlock Holmes was being written, it was just the current day.
Yeah.
And then for some reason he just never kept going forward. I don't know why. That's
Imagine
interesting.
something like that would have happened to like Superman or Batman. Like they never got out of the
Yeah,
30s.
why did Batman and Superman get out of the 30s and 40s, but like, Sherlock Holmes didn't?
Yeah.
That's so weird. Huh. Um. Okay, I think that pretty much does it. I'm not sure how much of this was just about like the specific topic or how much of it just kind of floated around those
It was about
ideas.
50-50 of us babbling and us talking about the actual topic.
It's a pretty big topic. There's only going to be some natural amounts of babbling trying to get through every little potential area of conversation. If nothing else, there's lots of things for people to latch onto in comments.
Yeah.
Yeah, please leave your comments below. Okay, what are we going to be talking about next time? Oh, I should pick something, huh?
Review topic, yes.
Yeah, you know what? We're gonna talk about like the dumbest fucking movie ever.
Ian, we're not reviewing your porno. Like, stop asking.
No, not the sexiest movie ever. The dumbest fucking movie of all time that I love to death.
Is it The Room?
No, we're gonna talk about Kung Pao Under the Fist.
Oh, awesome. I fucking love that movie. That is the greatest movie ever made. What are you talking about, dumb?
It's so fucking stupid.
It's amazing. Everything about that movie is perfection. Every frame.
Okay. Well, there's Steve's review. I've just been thinking about that movie a lot. I'm like, okay, I wonder if we can have an intelligent conversation about this, or if it's just going to be an hour and a half of us quoting the movie. So we'll see how next week turns out. Everyone, thank you very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the philosopher.
I'm the politician.
And I'm the other guy.
And we are your geeky gentlemen. And we will be discussing things.
I keep saying that every time because there's nothing else to think about. I just keep saying it. I'm the other guy.